Without doubt, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of ASTV's Premier League show, Match Week 14. Can't believe we're already 14 weeks into this thing, and before we know it, it'll be 24 hours from now, and we'll be into Match Week 15, because the only thing the Premier League likes more in the middle of winter is probably VAR controversies, are more fixtures to talk about VAR controversies. Speaking of controversial, I'll introduce my guest and co-host, Mr. Paul Bickler. How are we doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm surviving. I was just telling you before how I came down sick this weekend. So it's the struggle bus. I'm on cold meds and lozenges and riding the mute button tonight.
Well, I mean, let's just admit it. If you're on cold meds and lozenges and the mute button, then it's just slightly off what a normal night would be with you. So
might be an improvement.
I wouldn't say an improvement, but that cold medicine does get you going. So it might get you loose before it. Who knows what we're going to find. We're going to jump right into this week. Look at the fixtures. Interesting game weeks overall, I thought. Lots of crazy score lines. We will touch specifically and spend a good amount of time talking about the Manchester City-Tottenham match. Not only what happened on the pitch, off the pitch, and what it might be saying about both clubs moving forward. And we'll get to that a little bit further on down the line. But I think there was enough here for us to dig our teeth into. We don't normally spend too much time on Liverpool on this show, knowing that it's a Liverpool-centric channel that we do this Premier League show on. But I think anytime you have a 4-3 actual thriller in the Premier League, you'd be probably doing a Premier League match week review show wrong by not starting with that match. So we'll talk about it a lot more in detail, the tactics and all the things that would put half of these listeners to sleep a little later in our Monday night podcast. But Paul, outside of a whole hell of a lot of fun if you were a neutral watching that match, what are your actual overall reactions in response to it being a supporter of one of the two sides? To be honest, regardless of which side, because I think you kind of feel sick to your stomach leaving that match, no matter who you support.
Look, I think you get enough beats in the Premier League, good or bad, that when you get the good beats, you take those, right? Like, I think I would have more of a problem riding this 3 points if it was down to a refereeing decision, because you know you're going to get plenty of those situations. The fact that at least the points were settled on the pitch fairly, to me, relatively speaking, I'll take that. I think both teams look completely vulnerable, wide open, which is probably a thing that both sides need to address. But if you're a Liverpool supporter, this had kind of all sorts of like crazy things. It had Trent essentially scoring 2 goals in the midst of us discussing what do we actually do with Trent? Can he actually defend to save his life? And now we're asking, does it really matter again? You've got a dreadfully out of form midfielder scoring. You've got a midfield who can't start scoring. You've got a former Liverpool player in Fulham scoring. It was just absolute bedlam.
Yeah, it was craziness all in all. I thought that the way the match unfolded, I think spoke a lot about both. I made a comment in the post-match show, or maybe it was the pre-match show. I made the comment where I said, I think Fulham is honestly going into the match. Fulham's in like one of the worst spots you can be in all of professional sports. They're not good enough to think they're going to compete for anything the rest of the way. And because of how bad those around them are and some of the results they've gotten so far, they really have nothing to really worry about either. So they were literally guys like on the beach in the middle of December, or the beginning of December. And that's a scary place as a club to be, especially when you're one who last year looked like they were moving forward. I think the performance that they put on going forward shows they still all believe in Marco Silva as the manager, and going forward, he has them in the right mindset. I think last year they were so determined to make sure they stayed in the Premier League after the last 2 times they came up and went right back down. And I think with Mitrovic and the way they played, it all felt like it was coming together and they were taking a big step forward. This felt like it was kind of like a little bit of breath of fresh air, but in some ways I almost feel like it might have been just like fool's gold, because I thought the manager got the starting lineup wrong, even though we all basically picked it. The midfield isn't balanced enough. It doesn't work. You have two guys who want to go forward, and the guy all the way deep is maybe the most talented player to play forward of all three midfielders, which is what you see in the moments when he gets up there. So I think in some ways what you saw there was Liverpool still at Anfield is a force to be reckoned with. The supporters, I thought, were actually, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in the pod, I thought the supporters were actually quiet and almost mediocre for 60, 70 minutes. And then late, they got loud. It all changes when a guy like Endo scores a game-tying goal and it pops up out of nowhere and it's like a really well-taken goal. And then before you can even get down from the high of, holy shit, we're not going to lose this, they take the lead like a minute and 10 seconds later. And you're like, are you kidding me? And the way it happens and just the craziness that afterwards. But I don't know about you. I still didn't think the thing was done at 4-3. This felt like Bournemouth all over again, and we were going to find a way to lose this thing 5-4 in extra time. Like, it just made no sense. So we might have exhausted that one. The one thing I'll say there is we've criticized Klopp in the past on our podcast, on our shorts, anywhere people would listen, because there isn't much to say bad about the manager as a man. We've criticized him for not using substitutes. I will say, if Liverpool goes on to anything great this year, it will be like the year of the Jurgen Klopp adjustment, because he has adjusted his own ways. And maybe that's by getting more talent or feeling better about the guys on the bench. But he's making substitutions that are actually changing matches, and he's changing tactics, which is odd and refreshing all at once. And I honestly can't tell you the last time he made a second half substitution that didn't work or impact the match in a positive light. He's really kind of pulling the strings. And at this point, I think I'm going to come down a little bit off I know which three guys should play in the front. I know which guys should come off the bench, because he's actually rotating players for the first time ever. And I think it's actually working to the betterment of the club and to their results.
Yeah, it is. And thank God for that, considering the fact that we have like 20 games in the next 15 days, it feels like. So, like, time couldn't be better there.
So, if we jump off the Liverpool match, I think we got to talk about the United versus United match here Saturday afternoon. It was an interesting one. It was kind of billed as maybe a match of the weekend. I think if you're a Newcastle United fan, it might have been, because it made you believe. And I know Manchester United isn't the Manchester United of old, but Newcastle basically brought them in and whipped them like they came out behind the woodshed. After they scored the first goal, I would argue Newcastle sat back without Pope and the injured player, and we're like, you know what? We're just going to be resolute and stout. They can't score on us. We can win this game 1-0. If we have to, we'll score another goal later if they crop up and get one. I don't know that United was ever in this match, like literally when they got on the bus. Is Ten Hag's time pretty much done, Paul?
Well, the rumblings today are that he's lost part of the dressing room, essentially, because like the players don't love his tactics. They think he's too hard in training, yada, yada. To me, it sounds like a bunch of crybabies, to be quite honest. And I think there's been enough high payroll players in that side who have floated through that it sounds to me like, I think a little bit sounds like there's some structure that's been lacking and they don't have buy-in. And honestly, I have been one of the biggest, most ardent defenders of Bruno Fernandes of anyone. Like, I mean, like in our support channel, I get plenty of shit for sticking up for Bruno Fernandes. And I tell you, there's some rot in the core of that player room. And traditionally, I've said for United that I think the rot really starts at the top with that ownership and it has trickled down. I think Bruno Fernandes is a problem for that team. And if I look at his mannerisms out on the pitch, and he is now the captain of that side. And if you have lost the dressing room, that's because you've lost the captain. So, like, for me, I don't think that If it were me, I would stick with the manager and I'd start working on the players. I don't think that's how this will probably go down, though.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. I mean, I do think when you make moves, like he's basically lost Rashford, and I understand Rashford clearly has something going on in his own head. He looks like a dejected figure on the pitch. Now, you have Sancho out in the wind, basically on a rift with the manager. You have Rashford getting the manager basically trying to take like the positive spin on mental health. Like, we're going to support the player until he figures things out. You know, we all know Anthony Martial is, you know, the most pouty, angry looking dude. He could score 3 goals and hit the match winner. Yeah, he's just French and angry. He was 19 years old, got to move to Manchester and get like a huge money move. You know what I mean? Big money move. And he's never been happy with it ever. Plus he wears gloves in the middle of the summer in England. So that's just awkward anyways. But there's so much going on at that club. And then you add in the fact that they put the record money into Anthony. That's not working out. And that was Ten Hag's guy. You know, all these reports too. I read the same reports you did today about the dressing room. If they genuinely are bringing back Lisandro Martinez while surgically fixing or like getting him back around the club because they think that Ten Hag needs someone on his side in the dressing room to talk to players, it's beyond you lost the captain.
It's too late.
You lost everybody. Yeah. It's too late. And this is the thing. They've already poisoned the young players. They saw how he handled the Van de Beek situation. They saw how he handled some of the other players. Let's be honest. I saw an article the other day and I laughed at the headline, but then I decided to click on it and I read the reporter's article. And he made the most stark case to why Harry Maguire is United's player of the season. Like statistically, since he's been put back in the side, they are like, that's when they started winning in the Premier League again, 5 out of the last 6 before the Newcastle match. It actually brought all the harmony. And then they showed how like Bruno Fernandes has gotten on better with both teammates and referees since Maguire's been back. Because their actual like club leader is right. And I know we like to poke fun at Harry Maguire, but like if any one player has covered himself in glory since the beginning of this season at Manchester United for the way he's handled everything thrown at him, from not leaving to fighting for his place back. Now, you don't have to fight that hard when you're fighting against Varane and Lindelof. It's, you know, it kind of solves itself. The best thing that ever happened to Harry Maguire was Luke Shaw, a left back, blowing out a hamstring because it meant they needed a center back to play center back because, you know, Ten Hag was going to do everything he could. I just don't think, like, if you look at Amrabat, Mount, Eriksen, Casemiro, every one of these players was bought while Ten Hag was there. And I think there's just not enough Lisandro Martinez. And I don't even think he's been that good. But we're talking, I mean, even Onana. And now they're talking about them maybe being in for the AC Milan keeper and them giving up on Onana at $60 million after one season. Like, it's almost insane. But here we are, like usual, right? Talking about the team that lost, that carries all the headlines and steals all the headlines, and not the team that is really, like, playing well. How big a loss is Nick Pope for Newcastle should he miss an extended period? And it looks like he will.
I mean, it's a pretty significant loss for them for sure. I think the thing that really saves them is that, unlike Liverpool, I think that they have a definitive shape back there that lends itself to team defending, right? Whereas I think you could make the case, as we've seen throughout last weekend, I think that Alisson has single-handedly kept matches not only in front of us, but I think that he's won matches. And I think not that Pope hasn't done that for Newcastle, right? I just think they've got a much more definitive shape. But yeah, he's going to be big either way. But they've got a consistent back four that writes itself in. So I think they'll be okay.
So let me ask you this. I personally always thought Dubravka was actually a good goalkeeper, not a bad one. He had gotten hurt right before Eddie Howe came in, which led Eddie Howe to go to the backup, and then they bought Pope. And Pope's been nothing but stellar in his 2 seasons at Newcastle. I saw some interesting reports today that Howe was never a big fan of Dubravka, but couldn't get a backup keeper in that he liked, which is why they brought him back from United and kept him for this season. So there's a lot of talk that in January they will go get themselves a keeper. If you are Newcastle United, hopefully playing in Champions League, if not Europa League, right? And the league, hopefully the League Cup, all these different competitions. Are you going out and signing free agent David De Gea that hasn't played all year, that has Premier League experience, knows every opponent dressing room in the league and all the travel and the hotels? Or are you going back to the future, as they like to say, as one of our slides that's coming up will say? Are you going to your old Bournemouth days, and are you going to Arsenal and getting Aaron Ramsdale as your keeper for the second half of the season on loan?
I mean, that's interesting. I think loan is probably the move that I'd make, right? Because you could get top talent, right? Given their comps that they have and who they are and where they play and all that. The problem is like when you do that, you're going back. What happens in April with Nick Pope back, right? That's why I think a loan option's probably the way to go. If you're not, I would ride this out and see what this looks like with Dubravnik, right? And if he struggles, then I'm looking at that. You're certainly probably not feeling good about putting Carries in at this point. No. So if you can get him off Instagram long enough.
And I don't even know if you play him in like that League Cup match. Like, I think at this point you tell Loris Karius, like, we are going to let you put a Premier League uniform on again. And we're not letting you put it on at Anfield because we are afraid you might poop yourself when you walk out.
Right. That poor dude, man, just can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, I do feel for him. I've always wanted him to like get a chance again somewhere at a decent club, not a big club. Because I'm afraid if he gets a shot at a big club, he'll get back to a big spot, and we will see the exact same thing. Because to me, he had the talent. He showed the talent. He just also showed that in a big moment, and even like a big moment for him, it was going to go bad. Because anytime he was asked to make a big moment or have a big time, he struggled with it. And I just think that's a mighty one. So we'll hit on one more match here quickly. That I thought was interesting this weekend. It's not the Burnley 5-0 because there's nothing interesting about Sheffield United, honestly. And
is this the worst? Is this the worst like promoted side ever? Like in the Premier League?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about them. We're going to talk a little bit about that club in a minute. And because of that, we're just going to save it. But I do believe that Chelsea and Brighton at this point have decided they are going to be the most entertaining sides in the Premier League, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. If you look at Chelsea's results from the 4-4 draw to the draw with City to the crazy 4-1 win over Spurs to, this matchup here, to the fact that I think they've had players sent off in 4 of the last 5 matches and won 2 of them. Like, it's just there's crazy things happening at Chelsea. So Chelsea-Brighton, it was a match of just madness in my mind. From Conor Gallagher's 2 yellows in 5 minutes, which were just – I still can't believe Chelsea fans are arguing about the second one. Yes, he gets the ball. And 2/3 of the dude's Achilles from behind. Like, I don't understand.
Well, I don't understand why you give the captain's armband to a young player who literally plays the game like it's a roller derby match. Like Conor Gallagher, like that's the thing is he's like, I don't even think he's out of control half the time. He just looks it. Like, you know what I mean? So it makes it easy. Like when he goes in and he doesn't get a clean look with the ball, it makes it real easy.
So, Chelsea got the goals early. They got the goals from, I think it was Badiashile had the flick and Enzo Fernandez had the header, and then Colwell got the one off the line. Enzo gets the other penalty. Brighton gets them back. James Milner, gotta love the man, but man, like you show your age with that tackle in the box and the penalty he gives away there. No. You just can't do it when your team finally gets back into it. Is Brighton maybe just focusing on the Europa League at this point with the one eye towards the fact that they're not getting back into the top 4 race probably at this point in the Premier League?
It's got to be. I just think, for all the midfield talent they have, I mean, they're just too thin. They don't seem to have, we talked about it early in the year where they've always been such a fluent attacking side, and it seems like they had one too many pieces. And it still doesn't feel like they really know what to do between João Pedro and Ferguson. And it feels like their hand is forced in to play Ferguson, both financially and logistically. And it just doesn't seem to always work for them. But if you look across the board, part of the thing is they've always been really good at vetting and playing young talent, but you can't tell me in this spot you want to play an 18-year-old at left back, right? I mean, you go from an 18-year-old to James Milner. I think that's a 45-year age swing, but it's just not ideal for you as a team to effectively run out that team in the Prem League and expect to squeeze results out against sides like Chelsea with that lineup.
Yeah, I agree completely. So it was a crazy weekend, and we will talk about the craziest match that happened all weekend in a little bit. But before that, maybe the least crazy thing that happened is this Back to the Future for Sheffield United? Because it looks like the announcement has finally happened. I think this is probably the most shocking result of the entire campaign, is that it took until December 4th for a Premier League manager to get the sack. But Paul Heckenbottom has gotten the sack at Sheffield United. They are bringing back Chris Wilder. I don't even know what to say about that. He's not a former manager. He is a legend at the club. And firing him was such an enormous story that bringing him back feels like it should be, but it just doesn't feel like it is, Paul, because is this not doesn't this feel like calling grandpa up and having him show up and just babysit, but really you don't let him watch the kids because your oldest one is old enough, but you just want grandpa, it's like grandpa from The Simpsons. You want him to still think he's important enough to have a role, but really you hired the girl next door to hang out and just play in the backyard the whole time, and you're paying her this is definitely a caretaking situation, right?
Yeah. It's just, I don't know what you do with this side when you're looking at a team with a goal differential that's twice as many games as they've played, and they've scored 11 goals in 14 matches. It's I don't know what you do with that. This was a 6-pointer for them, right? This was their one shot at maybe trying to squeeze off the bottom here, and you get beat 5-0. You potentially your best player doesn't know how to jump without leading with his elbow anymore. It was a wild match.
I do feel for Heckenbottom in a way. I mean, what he did last year in getting them up was literally they weren't even a championship side at times last year. And they went on a run at the end of the season to get into the guaranteed promotion spots. If they were in the playoff, they had zero chance. They were on fumes at the end of the year. They sold their 2 best players. The takeover never occurred. They spent less than any team that's ever been promoted. And they have the lowest wage bill of anyone in the top 2 divisions in English football. And this guy, the fact that they even had a result this year and had anything, the fact there hasn't been absolute mutiny and he hasn't quit on them, I think speaks to his character. The fact he never threw anyone under the bus, even last night when he knew he was getting the sack in his post-match press conference, or Saturday afternoon, whenever it was, when that thrashing ended. I do feel for the guy. I really do. And, they told him there'd be recruitment. They told him to be investment. I understand they went out and got him, Cameron Archer from Aston Villa. It's a nice player who will probably bag them enough goals to be mid-table next year in the championship. But I'm with you. Chris Wilder basically got a job. They told him, try to keep your mouth open just long enough for a few flies to roll in, like there are in this picture. And 2, just do whatever you can to not make this super embarrassing the rest of the way, and get us to the championship, and we're going to hire somebody else and you're going to walk away and we'll let someone else coach this team. I can't see Chris Wilder's taking this job thinking there's a way to keep them up. And I can't see him taking this job thinking I'm going to go down into the championship with this club. I mean, They need new owners. And it's just an absolute train wreck. And it's scary to think that this team finished 2 points outside of the European places their first year in the Premier League, with the crazy inverted fullback or center backs playing, overlapping over fullbacks. And it just proves that you can have a niche or you can have little things for short periods. It's like the Wildcat in the NFL. It works for a little bit, and then people get tape on it. And once there's a little game film, people figure out crazy-ass tactics, because they went from being everybody's darling to right back to being Sheffield United before anybody realized.
Yeah, it's a shame for the Premier League this went down the way it did, because it doesn't add anything to the competition, right? I mean, if this was a college football playoff committee, they would not have gotten it.
That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. I'm sure I'll find a way to make an insult or take a shot at the people from Florida State and Alabama at some point during this program.
Nice.
But I mean, it couldn't have happened to nicer people than those great kids from Georgia to finish 6th. Because when you're Georgia and you look at that and you think to yourself, shit, we are better than 4, maybe 5 of the 4 teams ahead of us. This is ridiculous. But you know what? That's what happens when you go ahead and blow games. But talking about blowing games, Manchester City versus Tottenham. City drops points in 3 consecutive league matches after draws that I'm not sure anyone really saw coming. Maybe the Liverpool match some people felt might be a draw, but I think all in all, most people felt that City would get the job done, especially at home, coming off the international break. So, Paul, sure you watched this match. If you didn't watch it, I'm sure you followed the highlights. More about City's faulting at the back and maybe their lack of depth? Or should we give Tottenham credit for going on the road, getting a point at a tough place, playing literally without a third of their squad, and 6 of which started during their last time they played their best 11?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think these are 2 sides that have similar issues with depth. And I think you got to give Tottenham credit for going in essentially with a skeleton crew and playing their little legs off. And I think that the main thing is that they cohesively look like a side who know who they are, and a side with running against a Manchester City side who seems like they're starting to lose a little bit of their identity. And I think it's just like 2 trains passing in the night. And I think this one was this one had everything. But I think to me it was interesting, because I think what these sides are deficient in, I feel like they have really, really similar deficiencies. And I think that City's going to find a way, but we talked about earlier, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens this January, because I don't know that City is going to go in and just reload, or they're going to go in and make some big signings like we've seen in the past. And really, this is the first time they've gone into January and desperately needed to do that, even though they've been down. In the past, they've been down to us, or they've been down to Arsenal going in the winter break. Both of those sides were loaded, and they don't have that this year. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what this looks like going in here through January.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think a couple things that would be key for City, obviously, is Guardiola looking like a $100 million defender. That would be that would really, 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 really help them. I do think that's a big key. I mean, they spend a lot of money. I do think he has all the talent. You can see the talent, but he hasn't clicked with them yet. They haven't figured out how to utilize them. And I'm not sure the tactics that Pep is playing is actually playing to his strengths. I think that would help. I think John Stones being healthy enough to be a starter every match changes things for City, because then he becomes the inverted center back in their mid 3, moving into midfield. I do believe that when you take out a guy like Kevin De Bruyne, you really start to make Erling Haaland just that much more human. Because what Haaland does better than any striker in the world is he takes every single chance you give him. And when you have a guy like Kevin De Bruyne on the pitch, he creates 2 or 3 more of those chances every 2 matches. So Haaland gets 1 to 2 more goals, and those are the difference between draws. Like, we've seen it so much, right? Like, teams play City great for 85 minutes, and then Haaland scores a brace, and they win 3-1. Like, it's just the most annoying, but it's not annoying. It makes sense. It's what they're trying to do. It's part of their tactics. And I don't think it works when you don't have alternate goal-scoring match winners. And I think that's what they don't realize is they didn't realize how many big goals came between Mahrez and Gundogan. Like, I don't think they recognized that, like,
Right.
yeah, they were actually fringe players. Most people would have told you that Gundogan and Mahrez weren't even in their best 11 when they were all healthy. But they won matches, whether it was from the bench or from starting and being key contributors. And I think they tried to replace those guys with Phil Foden. And they tried to replace those guys with, and I don't even know who the midfielder they tried to replace Gundogan with. Kovacic, maybe? I mean, I like Kovacic. I think he's an actual really good footballer. But that's not he's Jordan Henderson. He's just not English. So it's there was something about the construction of this team never made sense to me. And I think Pep knows it as well, which is why he's already starting to like make the excuses and make the comments. I also think that Alvarez looks absolutely gassed. Like, he was never asked to play this much. You take the World Cup run last year, the mid-winter World Cup where he played all those minutes, then the second half of last year where he played a ton of big minutes, and now this year where he's an everyday mainstay. He looks to me like he's gassed, and you're not getting as much out of Foden, and we don't know what happens with Kevin De Bruyne. I don't think they spend in January. I do think they get healthy enough to be competitive. And if you were asking me to place a bet with my money, knowing I would lose it if it really didn't come true, I would bet on them to win the league. I'm not going to lie. But I think the bet's a hell of a lot closer now to Arsenal, Liverpool, maybe even Villa. Like, the bet is a lot closer to the field than it was at the beginning of the year where it would have been City on a landslide.
I think we're on the precipice of entering some really interesting unknowns with City because picture this. Like, I kind of look at Haaland from a personality similar to like how I see Abramovich, right? And so like, where has Haaland ever been where he's not the guy? Do you know what I mean? Like, where he's not the man and where like everything doesn't run through him and where he's not just smashing it, right? From his very early career all the way through, he's been the prodigy to the goal scoring monster at every level he's been at, except for a few isolated Champions League matches with Dortmund where he got pocketed, right? Everywhere he's been, he's had very little resistance. He comes in the Premier League, he's smashing records his first year in, just throttling everybody. This is the first time that Haaland's ever seen any real resistance in his career, any real like rough patch. And I'll be really curious to see what this does to his mentality and whether he can bounce back and how he responds to this. Because I can tell you, like, everywhere he's gone, everyone's sort of like, waved palms and like made sure he was okay. And like everyone catered to him. And that's not going to happen with City. And we've already seen a number of run-ins with him and Pep post-game. We see him storming off this game. Like, if City have a number of rough results consecutively after this one, I think this could get really spicy. I'd be very, very curious to see what happens here because, like I said, we've never seen Haaland ever have any sort of situation in his career where he's had to overcome any real adversity.
And and you would think you knew what was coming on the next slide. And I will tell you, we do not have that type of crack production people, so he does not. But the other part that shouldn't go under the radar here is, and you're spot on, by the way, he's never had adversity. And I don't like to do this because it like judges a player's character that a person I don't personally know, but I'm going to do it anyways because, well, that's what makes good TV and radio. But there has to be something for being a professional footballer's son. That also adds to that never having any adversity. So, like, right, we all love to poke fun at the troubled kids that come from the streets or come from a city or understand things, like just have crazy things happen. Like people talk about, the stories about Luis Suarez, like literally being homeless in Uruguay and then basically being willing to sign with any agent who would take him anywhere, basically as a slave, if they would get him somewhere to play football. You've heard all these stories. You heard about Mario Balotelli, like fighting with youth team coaches because he was adopted by Italians and he was the only black kid in the entire community. So you can imagine what his childhood was like, being the most athletic and rude kid on the team. And I'll exemplify rude. That's probably the most second thing he is, because the funniest part is the most thing he is Italian, because you've never met a more Italian person than Mario Balotelli. But like the mindset is this kid didn't grow up ever struggling with anything.
Right.
He's like the third or fifth of seven or something in a family that grew up with money and a professional footballer and parents who loved them and traveling around Europe and cultured and schooling and languages. So like, when has life ever been difficult for him? So if now it becomes difficult, and it does feel like it is difficult. So there has been a ruling on this since, and anyone who hasn't seen some of the memes that have been made with this face, they are pretty epic. So I definitely recommend Googling Erling Haaland face. You will get some good photos and some really good memes, including like the one with him and the cat chick from the Desperate Housewives. That one might be the best one so far, where they're like pulling him back. It's the greatest meme ever. You can use it for anything, and look at this. There were many that thought he would actually get charged for this tweet. I not being one of them, because, well, TFA doesn't exactly worry about rules when it comes to Manchester City. So, did you think he was in trouble based on both his actions on the pitch, at the podium, and then the fact that he actually sent a tweet out, which is usually what gets you in trouble for putting it in writing?
I didn't think he'd get in trouble for any of them until he got online, because that's usually the one that you can't do. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. I wouldn't be surprised if they still don't ding him here, but not.
I don't know. The FA, I think the FA came out today and said they're going to charge City as a club and none of the players involved directly, which basically means if we just charge City, they'll cut the check for a larger amount. But if we charge Haaland, they'll fight us, and they'll actually pay less in the long run. We just want your money.
Some offshore account they have.
We just want your money, and more than anything, we actually want Erling Haaland to play against Villa on Wednesday.
Right.
So let's take aside the crazy ass reactions, which I think were over the top, and I thought was too much. How bad of a call is this by Simon Hooper?
It's so bad. Okay. And as Liverpool supporters, we don't want to get into this, but the problem that I have is when this happened to Liverpool versus Tottenham, everyone called us crybabies and said we should get over it. When we made it really clear, we just want the standard across the league to be better for everybody, right? Hits a little bit different now, doesn't it? No, but for real, it's so bad. And I think Kaz put in the channel that they saw that our next ref for upcoming match is going to be Simon Hooper. I don't know if they'll probably just going to reassign him to the championship again. But it's how many times can you do this? How many times can you continue to bounce a referee down a league? And this is the same thing he did. He's did the same call versus Tottenham. Same one. Where he basically whistled for a foul, then indicated advantage, then whistled for it back. It's wild to me, man. And we did this back in Tottenham with the Tottenham match. The metrics for Simon Hooper are towards the bottom, across the board. He's just one of the lower rated refs in this league, which says a lot because I think they're all pretty poor. But in this situation, given the magnitude, given the game, given the situation, really, really bad.
Yeah, I think he will ref on Wednesday because I just think it comes too fast to redo it. I genuinely do. And I will say this. I thought up until that moment, and you can't get a moment like that back. I'm going to be very clear. I don't want anyone to think I thought up until that moment, he was really good in that match and actually let a 3-3 match pretty much breathe without being too much involved in it, not too many cards. He did something that nobody does, which is he actually cautioned Rodri in the first half. So he showed at the Etihad. Like, I thought he actually was officiating a proper football match, and it was actually aiding to what was on the pitch right up until the moment it was like the time to get the call right when you need to. And he let him down. Now, I will say this. One, I think that it was a terrible, terrible, terrible call. Two, I think Erling Haaland acted like an ass and way over the top ass. And if the league had any fucking balls and showed the same level of blame on him that they would another player, he'd be suspended for a match, if not two. Three, I think there's a 99% chance that Jack Grealish would have fluffed that shit, kicked the thing into the fucking stands. And we are talking about nothing right now. Like, I'm serious about that. I think there is a very good chance that keeper runs out at Jackie. He tries to wrap it with his right, and that thing literally fucking goes out for a fucking throw-in. But it doesn't matter because the referee botched it to no end. I mean, you can't make that mistake. And you can make that mistake if you just blow your whistle in the moment. You can't make that mistake when you wave forward.
Yeah, no. And I think the ugliest thing for me is like when Haaland gets really mad, he does this thing where he takes his hair thing out and he shakes his head like that, which is the most ridiculous thing anyway, right? Like, so he does that, and then he straight shoulder barges a 5'6" player on Tottenham's bench. And then Pep has the nerve to start going after random Tottenham players because the Tottenham dude started talking shit to Haaland, and like Pep comes over. And I'm like, dude, like your star player is absolutely like on fire right now. Like, get him off the pitch. Like,
yeah,
it was
wild. I mean, Kelly was funny yesterday when we were watching the match. Kelly looked up and she's like, man, someone should just kick this Bond villain right in the knee. And I was like, you know that Bond villain's the captain of your fantasy team. She goes, he's got a couple assists already, right? I went, yes, he does. Yes, he does. But she literally was like, just kick this Bond villain right in the knee. And that's exactly what he is, right? I mean, he's a cross between a Bond villain and the Overlord dude from Ghostbusters 2, the one that they brought back. That's Vigo or whatever it is. That's exactly what he looks like. Just an angry dude in a fucking screen. Someday someone will show me something endearing that he does. And I know everyone that talks about the player says he's like this big teddy bear. He's super good with kids. And he's likable. They actually compare him like American sports style to like Gronkowski, like a big kid, which makes me think he came from a really elite family where he didn't have to worry about much. So he got to always be a kid, and he's still just a big kid, which is why he cries when the call doesn't go his way on the field.
Right.
But we've all seen that. Doesn't always work for you when the times really get tough. So it'll be interesting, like you said, to see how they handle themselves. Speaking of where they are in the table, we look at it here, top half of the table, not much changes after the results. Villa withdraws. Liverpool and Arsenal wins, take them ahead of City at this point. On the run of play, knowing City takes on Villa this week, how important is it that Manchester City finds a way to get 3 points?
Oh, look, I don't think it's critical because we've got half a season left, and like we've seen what happens when teams have like a double-digit lead on them going into Christmas, and then what this looks like at the end of the year. I think if anything, it's I think it's more important to City that they play well than they get 3 points. Like that at the end of the day, that's how I feel about it. Like if they were to come out with a draw and they play really well, I think that's okay. I think they'll be fine with that. But at some point, I think the thing with City, though, is they're so used to winning that maybe that won't be enough, right? Even if they play well and draw, that may not be enough because, like, I don't know if this team, like, we don't know if this team has the mental fortitude to, like, withstand not running the table and not dominating consistently, right? I mean, so at some point they've got to start winning consistently again to put that swagger back into them. But I think, like, I still think, like, if they were to draw this, like, it doesn't mean that they can't turn around. You know, like, if Arsenal wins and they draw, like, you're telling me, like, that they can't make up 5 points down the second half of the stretch, you know? Like, I think they will.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
So.
I mean, they could absolutely do that. You're right.
Yeah.
It's not about whether it's critical as much as it is, like, at what point do the inconsistencies become consistent problems, I guess, is where
I think
I'm
it's
looking at it.
there for them. I think it's already there for them, if we're being honest.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I asked you right now, we'll take Tottenham out of it because I know you're show me first and coming off 3 straight losses and then a draw. It's not the greatest of show me's. Newcastle, Villa. Who finishes ahead of who come the end of May?
Ooh.
I think that's a really tough question because I'm starting to lean
That's a
towards
really
the team
tough
in
question.
6. I'm starting to lean towards the team in 6 because I think they believe, as much as I love the manager of the 4th place team, I'm starting to think that the whole club, city, fan base, players, I think they believe in the manager and each other. And it seems like there's something really fun happening. And I think them getting bounced out of Champions League may be what catapults them back into it for next year.
I will always give the team that's better defensively the edge, and Newcastle's better defensively.
Fair. And I think they can score as many goals if they have to. And
Yep.
how good Gordon's playing. I know we love to rag on him as the diving Everton kid. It's unbelievable how good he is. It's 1 year in, and he looks like the player that we all thought was a joke that Chelsea was rumored to pay $50 million for. And then Newcastle got him for 45, and we were like, that's still too much. And now it looks like it's probably not enough.
But also, like, I mean, and this just goes to, like, how careers go. Like, I think he could have very well gone to Chelsea and killed his own career.
Oh, 100%. This is a prime example of him making a decision to go to a club like Newcastle from Everton. And I remember people even criticizing him, being like, yeah, they have money, but what are they going to do for your career? You're just going to be another player. And then you'll be blown out as soon as they get all the oil money comes in and you won't be playing. And I just feel like he made the right decision, and it took him time to bed in. And I give Eddie Howe credit for working through his issues at the beginning and finding a way to make him a contributor. And I mean, God knows he's more than a contributor now. He's a large part of their success. At the other end of the table, Everton pulls out another victory, beats Forest. And I'm telling you right now, I believe that if Luton or Burnley or anyone can string a few results together, there is a chance that Forest gets sucked into this thing. Because that was one of the worst performances I've ever seen of any professional football side. I think that team's quit on Steve Cooper. I think, the fact that they go to a freaking overweight Divock Origi to try to win games in 2023 in the Premier League is insane to me. I really believe that Forest might be in some real trouble here. I think Sheffield United is done. We've talked about that since the beginning of the season. I thought Burnley was done, but I think when you score 5 goals in any match, I just immediately am like, well, who knows? And they got a match against. Well, they play Wolves, so they play Wolves, and then I think they get Luton or someone. They have 2 or 3 results on a run. People forget Burnley played 4 of last year's top 7 in the first 5 weeks of the season or something like that.
Right.
And they had a match to make up. So if Burnley can turn it around, Bournemouth is playing better, looks a team that can score goals and get a result. Maybe we end up with a relegation battle, right? Like, could that end up being is Forest, Luton, Everton? Like, where are we looking here? Who is
it could be. I mean, this is always this like shit pile at the bottom here is going to end up being who's healthiest and who catches any sort of form, right? So, I mean, but yeah, this is just at this point, this is a bunch of teams tinkering with stuff and trying to figure it out, right? And I feel like Forest had figured it out from an attacking standpoint. Lost 3 straight. Those are all 1-point games for pretty decent sides when you look at it. Outside, I mean, you can say what you want about Everton. I think they're actually a pretty decent side. But I think they're going to have to figure it out. We'll see what happens. But you're right. I mean, Bournemouth's starting to put it together now. So, like, we're going to have to see. It's still a long way up for Burnley and Luton Town to get out of there. But, like, if they're able to, like, Luton Town looks like they have some fighting in them. And if Burnley is able to catch fire here, then, like, yeah, they could be sucked into this. Fulham's another one that they continue to decline, could end up down there. So I think there's a lot more football to be played. And that bottom half of the table is just bad enough to make it interesting.
Well, we get matches back tomorrow starting 2:30. You got Wolves Burnley. So again, Burnley right back on it. Get a chance to go take one down. Luton has a tough matchup having to take on top of the table Arsenal. And then Wednesday you get Liverpool, Sheffield United, Forest, and Fulham. Palace taking on Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford. Chelsea, Man United could be an interesting one. And Villa City, probably the highlight of the weekend. And then, of course, Everton, Newcastle, and Spurs, West Ham. What jumps out at you here, Paul? If you were able to watch just 1 or 2 matches here, which ones are you tuning in on and why?
I think Chelsea United is going to be really intriguing just because it's just a shit show between those two clubs. I think Chelsea's still trying to figure it out. United's in the process of imploding. Will they do it here? I think I think this is kind of like when I pass a bad car wreck. I'm going to be watching this just because I want to see, like, does this have the possibility to get really, really ugly, right? And then I think, you mentioned Villa City just because City desperately need this, and this Villa side can cause problems from an attacking standpoint. So those are
especially at home.
Yeah,
especially at home. They play really well at home. People forget that it's the second or third largest domestic stadium in all of the land before the new stadiums were built. When Wembley isn't available, they play national team games at Villa Park for a reason. It's got a huge atmosphere. I think they'll be up for it, obviously. It's a nighttime kickoff. That's a lot of drunk people. And I could see City being uneasy with what's happening, and I could see Emery making it uneasy for Pep with his tactics.
Brummies get wild, man. Brummies get wild. Birmingham knows how to party. That'll be fun.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think the Villa City match is going to be huge. I do agree with you, Chelsea United. I think there is a great underlying story. Obviously, we talked about Gordon having to go back, play at Everton. That'll be interesting to see what that's like. I hope he can handle it because he's clearly got a hot head. I think it's part of what makes him kind of I think he can play within that fire, and he likes that. As we saw as Liverpool supporters when he played at Anfield playing for Everton as a kid who'd done nothing and acted like he'd already taken over the world. I think there's a part of that helps you. I think there's a part of that can really hurt you. I would not be shocked one bit if Eddie Howe didn't start him
me neither.
on Thursday, because I also think that's what makes Eddie Howe a really, really good manager. And I think Harvey Barnes is just about ready to play. And maybe this is the game you let him play and you remind the kid you're going to play on the weekend and then the Champions League next week when it really matters. So we'll see. Everybody, thank you so much for watching tonight's show. If you are watching us right now on Facebook and you are not on the YouTube page, please go ahead and head on over, subscribe to the channel. You'll get all the great content that we put out. If you feel like you would like to get involved with our crazy asses, go ahead and send us a message on any of our channels, and we will go ahead and get you involved. For everyone here at American Scouser TV, we appreciate you for watching the Premier League show. Bickler and I will be back next week, and I hope you all have a great week.